سلام، وقت همگی بخیر. مسعود قدرت‌آبادی هستم، استادیار دانشگاه ایالتی کالیفرنیا در شهر ساکرامنتو. توی ویدیو امروز میخوام راجع به نحوه مصاحبه کردن با اساتید صحبت کنم. خیلی از شما اپلای میکنید، ایمیل میزنید به استادا، کارتون جلو میره و میرسه به مرحله‌ای که حالا دعوت میشه از شما برای مصاحبه. میخوام امروز راجع به سوال‌هایی که توی مصاحبه پرسیده میشه صحبت کنم و بیشتر از اون که دنبال جوابهای خوب باشم میخوام به شما توضیح بدم که چرا اساساً همچین سوالایی از شما پرسیده میشه. یعنی هدف مصاحبه کننده از پرسیدن این سوال مشخص چیه؟ دنبال اینی که چه چیزی رو از شما متوجه بشه با پرسیدن این سوال. چون که این ویدیو داره راجع به مصاحبه صحبت میکنه، به نظرم رسید که انگلیسی ضبط کنم و صحبت کنم این توی پرزنتیشن. شاید اصطلاحاتی که استفاده میشه بتونه به شما کمک کنه. یعنی احساس میکنم شاید فارسی صحبت کردن یه خود حق مطلب رو ادا نکنه اینجا. بنابراین میخوام که پرزنتیشنم رو امروز به زبان انگلیسی داشته باشم. امیدوارم که براتون مفید باشه. اجازه بدید من صفحه‌مو با شما شیر کنم. So let's get started. What is the purpose of these interviews? Whether you have the interview with an individual professor or you have the interview with a committee, the main purpose here is for them to evaluate whether you have what it takes to succeed in graduate school. So what are those main points? What are those main elements? First one is communication skills. And communication skills are beyond just merely speaking skills. Of course, they want to see if you can speak appropriately, if they can understand you. But the more important thing here is how well you express yourself. Can you effectively share your thoughts with others? So these are very important for graduate school. Therefore, they are very important for the people who are asking you those questions. They want to evaluate your interpersonal skills. For example, how well you manage stress or conflicts. They want to measure your interests and motivations. And they want to evaluate your maturity. I will talk about each of them in details, what is behind each of these, what could be behind each of these elements. So in an online interview, usually questions are categorized into these 5 sections. There are some predefined frameworks that maybe 80 to 90% of the times questions would be from those frameworks. And 10 to 20 times, depending on the professor's interest, their needs, the program requirement, they might ask some additional extra questions. But here I want to talk more about that general structure and look into these 5 types of questions. And again, within each of these categories, there could be several questions. If you just Google how to interview for graduate school, you will get a list of maybe 100 questions. So I just want to talk about the most important questions within each of these categories, because that way I have to talk for a few hours for each of these sections. But I just want to mention the most important things that you should be aware when the questions are asked within each of these 5 categories: personal characteristics, academic experience and goals, selected program, extracurricular activities, and finally, your questions. Let's take a look at all of these. Personal characteristics. Most probably the first question that you will be asked during the interview is, tell me about yourself. This looks like a straightforward question, right? You can start from your childhood, going to elementary school, going to high school, going to university, maybe tell something about your personal life, if you're married, if you have kids. This is not the right answer. This is not what they are looking for. Whatever question that you're asked during this interview, you shouldn't forget about the context. You shouldn't forget about the setting. What is the purpose of this interview? To evaluate, to see if you're prepared for graduate school or not. So when someone asks you, tell me about yourself, they are trying to see if graduate school plays any role in your life, that it fits your lifestyle. So when you tell the story of your life, You want to arrange these components of your story of life in a way that naturally the next step in your life would be going to graduate school. So when I look into this process, I see that, okay, graduate school is inevitable in your lifestyle. How to do this? The answer would be different for every person. I would say showing a record of being a continuous learner, always looking for new opportunities to learn and to contribute to your communities, to extend your knowledge, to share your knowledge with others. This would be a good thing if you can show that in your story. The next thing that is usually asked is what are your strengths and weaknesses? So here, answering about the strengths is quite straightforward, right? But there is a trap here that you can start sounding like an arrogant person, and you want to avoid that. You can avoid it by the choice of words, by the tone of your voice. These are all very important elements. You want to avoid saying something like, I was the best employee of that organization. I was the best student in that research lab, in that research group. Still, you don't want to sell yourself short. Here is no place for modesty. You want to show all the strength with confidence. This is the important part. You want to show that you're confident about your capabilities, but you don't want to sound like an arrogant person. But the weakness is more tricky because you want to be honest. You want to talk about, we all have our flaws, right? There's no perfect person in this world. So we want to talk about that. You want to talk about those flaws, those problems, but you don't want to sound like a problematic student. How to avoid that? Here is a very useful instruction. Pay attention. Whenever you talk about your problems, the difficulties that you have, or the weakness, you want to stay proactive. You want to say that every day, in every way, you are trying to be a better person. So you acknowledge those problems, you admit that you have that weakness, but what is important is that you are showing every day, you're trying every day, you're doing your best to resolve those issues. And this is the important part for that question. Then how you manage conflicts, stress, challenges, etc. And here again, providing examples would be super helpful. And as a professor, I would love to know if you had any conflicts with a colleague or with a professor, how you solved that. But again, the important part here is the trap here is negativity. You want to stay positive. Yes, you had that challenge with the coworker, but you want to stay professional. You want to stay positive. You don't want to talk negative about anyone in this interview. So you want to show them by examples that, yes, there were these challenges. We all face challenges in our daily life. And this is how I tackled those challenges, those difficulties, especially if you had some certain difficulties in your life. This is the time to talk about them. That's totally fine. And but again, staying positive, staying professional is the most important part. So for personal characteristics, I would say it's a good idea to spend a few hours just thinking about yourself. Nothing else, just think about yourself. Try to know yourself, to better know yourself. Try to identify every aspect of your behavior and try to find a reason for that and try to set up a plan for your future. So this would be a useful part. The second part of questions that are about academic experience and goal usually start with a question like, why are you interested in this field? I've already discussed this extensively in SOP in the video that I recorded for statement of purpose. So I don't want to repeat that discussion here, but just briefly talking about that, the main point here is to see whether you are here by choice or by force, that you are excited about what you're doing, and this is what you want to do in future. You want to continue this in future. You are excited about your field of study. You want to contribute more into the research. You want to have long-term impacts in that area. So I will encourage you, if you haven't watched that video, excuse me, if you haven't watched that video, I strongly encourage you to go back and look at that video. What are your research interests? Another question that could be asked. And here again, the professor wants to see if what you've done could be connected to what they do. So the important part here for you is trying to make a connection between what you've done in your maybe master thesis and what the professor is doing. So it's very important to study, to read about the professor, look into their research, looking into the most recent grants that they had, and try to match your research interest with that of the professor. Again, something that I talked a little bit about that in SOP. Basically, I can say that this interview is kind of an oral version of the statement of purpose that we had previously. What is the most pressing issue in your field today? The professor who's asking this question, or the committee who's asking this question, they very well know the answer to this question. But they want to see if you are aware of the most recent literature in your area. You have to have a good knowledge of what is the cutting edge research in your area. For example, in transportation engineering, we are doing a lot of cutting edge research in AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, autonomous and connected vehicles. There's a lot of research happening in those areas, ITS, intelligent transportation systems. And being able to discuss these items is definitely very important. You might be asked about your university experience. And again, here, the main idea is trying to see if you are prepared for that position or not. For example, they might ask you about the courses that you enjoyed most in your university, or the courses that you found most difficult, how you achieved a significant accomplishment. So in your resume, you had a list of awards and achievements. So you want to talk about the approach that you adopted to actually achieve those goals. This is the important thing here, because it shows you are prepared, you are ready to obtain that position and be successful in that position. Talking about your professors, that would be great. But again, everything that you talk about here should be positive and should be professional. What are your career goals? Here, you might want to talk about short-term and long-term plan. And this is one of the things that I want to see, to evaluate the level of professionalism and awareness in that student. For example, if someone asks you, what is your plan after graduation? And you say, I want to follow a postdoc. This is kind of a red flag, because postdoc is a transition period. It's a great opportunity to get more experience in research, but postdoc is not the final destination. It is only to prepare you for the next step in your professional life. For example, if you want to be a university professor, then that postdoc is going to help you a lot. Or you want to join a national research lab, that postdoc is going to help you a lot. But my point here is that you have to have that agenda in your mind, and you have to have a trajectory to achieve your goals. And therefore, you need to know exactly, you need to think with yourself, what is the right thing to do? What do I want to do after the graduation? Third part would be selected program. Why did you choose to apply to our program? I talked a little bit about that again in SOP, so I don't want to repeat everything here. But the main point here for the person who asked this question is to evaluate whether you care about that program. Are you randomly applying for whatever school or whatever professor that responded to your email, or the research that is done in that university is unique and is important for you, and you have some interest in that university, you have some interest for that professor, you looked into their recent alumni, recent graduate, and you found them excellent, where they landed was excellent. So these are the type of things that you should be aware of. So I would say you need to spend some time doing research, doing your homework. And your homework here is to look into that program, look into that university, look into that professor, and try to get a better understanding of what they're doing. Because that way you show that you care about them. And what other schools are you considering? This is also a common question in the interviews. These two questions are two sides of the same coin. Basically, I know that you are going to apply for several schools, right? It's not like you only apply for one single school. So the answer is yes. But what is more important for me to understand when I say when this question is asked is to see whether you distinguish between these positions or not, whether there is anything particular about my program that you are interested in that makes my program different from others. For example, you can say, I really love the work of Professor X, who's working in traffic safety, and I've done work in traffic safety, and this seems very interesting. This is very well aligned with my own interests, my own research interest. Or you have that special lab in your department that could help me perform some experimental data collection. Or I had a friend at undergraduate who joined your program, who landed a very great job, and he was happy with his graduate studies. He was happy with his life at school. Therefore, I found your program very interesting. So this is another type of answers that you can provide. Extracurricular activities. Tell me about your hobbies. This question, again, is very important question. Why? Because you will spend maybe hundreds of hours working with your PhD advisor. And this is a two-way avenue. As they are having an impact on your life, on your education, you also have an impact on their life, on their work. So for sure that professor wants to hire someone who they enjoy working with. Collegiality is very important here. Feeling comfortable in working with someone is very important. So it's important for me to know if I'm dealing with a one-dimensional nerd who only thinks about the school and thinks about himself or herself, or I'm working with a multidimensional student who read books, who watch movies, who go to gym. So next time that we are at a party or we are at a conference, there is something, or at a barbecue, there is something that we can talk about beyond our daily life. And again, the main fact here is work-life balance. You are hired to take care of the research, right? That professor is paying your tuition, is paying your stipend to conduct some research, right? So that is the priority. You shouldn't forget about that priority. You shouldn't forget about this important part of the graduate school. But you want to maintain this work-life balance. For sure, you don't want to say that I'm very interested in your university because there are good nightclubs in that city. This is not something that you are going to be recruited for. Or I want to go to that dance club that exists in your city. These are not the type of things that you want to mention in an interview like this, although you want to show that multidimensional aspect of your behavior and the work-life balance. Final section of the interview would probably ask a question like, do you have any questions for me? This would be the last question. And the worst answer and the wrong answer here is to say no. Because again, saying no here shows a sign of indifference, that you don't care about that program. Because if you care about them, if you care about that professor, if you care about that school, and this is the only time that you have the only opportunity for a face-to-face meeting with a professor, do you get all the information within 15 minutes? For sure not. And there were lots of questions asked from you. So here, when you prepare some questions, when you ask some questions, it sends a signal to that professor that this student is thinking, seriously about joining my program. So this is gonna be a good sign. And there are lots of questions that you can ask. Here is just an example of a few of them, like how long does it take typically to complete the program? So you can plan ahead of time. Some schools are notorious for very long PhD programs. You should be aware of that when you want to make that informed decision. Where are recent graduates employed? Are there any fellowships available? This question could be a little bit tricky for international students because you can talk about the funding opportunities later on during the application process. I leave it there, but I leave it to you to make a decision whether that is the right question to ask. And what is the selection timeline? So you know when you will hear back from them. If you have multiple options to choose from, you have a clear timeline in front of you. There are some, additional comments to make here. Let me go very quickly over them. First of all, prepare your environment. This is very important. Make sure that you have a very good internet connection. Arrive on time for that meeting. By the way, if you're living in Iran, maybe buying your internet from some private companies would be a good idea. If you can't afford it, maybe ask a friend or a relative to, let you use their place for, a couple of hours. Try to find a quiet place. All of us, we have accent when we are speaking English, right? Which is a great sign. It means we can talk at least 2 languages. But we want the accent to be the only, barrier in our connections. So make sure that you have a good microphone. Make sure that there is a good quality for the voice quality in your connection. Mock interviews are a great idea. As I said, if you just Google how to ace a graduate school interview, how to interview for graduate school, you will get a list of hundreds of questions. So it would be a great idea if you can ask one of your professors, if they have time, or one of your friends, a English instructor, to ask some of those questions, subset of those questions, and so you can better prepare for the interview. Bring good energy with you, bring good vibe. Try to enjoy that interview. You may or may not get that position. It doesn't matter. Try to enjoy it. Try to be yourself. Have a smile. Don't fake anything. Think about the answers and be honest with them. Speak from your heart. Say whatever that is true. Being honest here would work very well for you. Practice your listening skills. Don't interrupt the interviewer. Don't break the moments of silence. Usually in these online interviews, there could be a moment where the professor is asking you a question, you provide an answer, short but accurate answer, then there is a moment of silence. It doesn't mean that you have to break it. You have to extend the discussion. Just wait for the professor to moderate that discussion. And follow up. This would be also a good idea. If you can send an email the day after the interview to thank the interviewer and once again reiterate your interest in the program and maybe briefly explain why you think that you're a great candidate for that program. These are the type of things that should be considered before the interview, during the interview, and after that. امیدوارم چیزایی که من گفتم برای شما مفید باشه، به دردتون بخوره. برای همه شما آرزوی موفقیت میکنم. من امروز این ویدیو رو از خونه ضبط کردم. ستینگم کامل متفاوت بود. شاید به خاطر اینکه یه خود حس نزدیکتری ایجاد بشه برای اون محیطی که شما قرار درش مصاحبه رو انجام بدید. براتون بهترین آرزوها رو دارم. فعلا.